Welcome back. You are watching The Fix. I'm Karima Brown. Now we look at the weekend newspapers with the Mail and Guardian's Thanduxolo Jika. Thanduxolo, thank you so much for joining us. A lot going on in our papers. Peter, you have the first go.
Well, that's because it's a difficult day to choose a story. You know, we have the Sunday Times with a race over the DA list. So the lists, everyone has a little controversy. I'm not sure that Ace Magashule has been totally well reflected in the headline.
The headline, I agree with you.
But for me, the best piece in the newspaper today is Hilary Joffrey's column. In the Sunday Times, Business Times, where she talks about an old plan of the government, so a really old plan, and you'll enjoy this because the Mail Guardian is paying close attention to Eskom, where she says it's 2 decades old, and you don't need to split the Eskom into 3. There's no obvious way that solves any problem. But you basically, the 2 decades old plan is to pull out one of the pieces as an independent state-owned entity. There's a transmission grid, so an independent grid operator buys electricity from wherever it's available. And if it's available from Eskom, they buy it. And if it's not, well, there has to be some private sector supplier to buy it from. It doesn't matter. And I think it's such a well-made and simple point to grasp once you just figure out that the state will own this thing, and the state will decide from whom to get its electricity, and it will get its electricity from whomsoever is able to supply it.
Do you think Hilary Joffrey should whisper into the ear of Cyril Ramaphosa?
Well, I think that's one option they could look into it. But they also have, I don't know if you remember, in 2015, the Denton's report that Eskom paid for. It told them what the problems were, how to fix the problems. But it seems as if nobody is interested in implementing it because Eskom was spending too much money on contractors, independent contractors for coal, coal supply, diesel, etc. It actually troubles me that we have paid millions for this report on how to fix Eskom, but we're not implementing it. We are doing all these side shows of looking for, experts either from Italy or somewhere else.
By the way, did the Italians come?
No, they didn't come. They ended up not appointing them. Yes.
Oh, seriously?
I think there was a definite conflict of interest. They definitely involved in
IPPs.
exactly. And I think the point that Chris Yelland made very strongly, he warned against this. He said, do not appoint an arbiter that has a vested interest in what type of energy we choose. But for me, there's another interesting story in the Sunday Sun. I think it's on the second page there, Peter, if you could reach it. It's about the fact that the public broadcaster has now, as a new spokesperson, Neo has left the Sunday, or rather the SABC. Now, we know the SABC is factually insolvent. That was said to Parliament.
She can't have been there for long. I mean,
it's about 7 months.
She's been there for 7 months.
She's been there.
Is there a bigger story to this? I mean, it's buried in a kind of, tabloidy kind of paper.
Yeah. Look, I mean, Karima, the first question, we still don't know, why Kaiser Khanyago, who had been there for about 13 years, left the organization. And you would assume that what he went through probably is what Neo experienced here. And there seems to be quite a number of problems at SABC. I mean, the mere fact that, the board resigned, etc. And now we have a situation where they're saying they might even be struggling with paying salaries, etc. This month. So it tells you that there might actually be more to that than meets the eye.
But they can't pay salaries unless the government basically bails them out, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And the way this government will bail you out is it'll bail you out, but it'll put somebody in your company.
Well, certainly that is what Tito Mboweni had said. We're not just going to bail out. In fact, I mean, he turned the 100 billion of Eskom down and said we're not standing for that. Do you think that Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams has what it takes to get the Treasury to take us seriously, and as Peter says, bring this independent person in that will actually check where the money is going, considering that even though the heads of state capture have been removed at the SABC, the remnants in that middle management are actually all still in place, making decisions every single day.
That's quite correct. Look, I mean, I support, what Treasury says, in terms of, if you're going to give money to the SABC, you've got previous experiences of how this money and the state-owned entity has just gone. You would need somebody from Treasury. And for a number of years, I mean, Treasury has been sort of trying to follow up in many of these SOEs.
We're talking about the list, and I'm just, as you're talking, I'm thinking, we've got Claudia Mutsoneng implicated in basically laying waste to the SABC.
Yes.
He's registered a political party. In your view, is the IEC rules, do they allow for someone like that to register a political party and run for office?
I've no idea.
Look, I've never really looked into the IEC's regulations when it comes to who can register a political party and so, because I mean you would have people who have been convicted before and they can start a political party. I don't think it really there's something that prohibits him from starting a political party, considering the fact that also that Claudia has not been convicted anywhere. There hasn't really been much action that has been
a dodgy character.
Yeah, there hasn't been much action taken against what Claudia Mutsoneng has done. So, I mean, it's quite an interesting factor that, I mean, of course, he started a political party. And, of course, it's based on the fact that...
But he could well be arrested during the election campaign. Who knows?
Well, I mean,
what happens then?
Well, I mean, this is the whole thing. So what Ramaphosa is saying, as I understand it, is, look, I wash my hands of all of the things that you've done. I've appointed somebody to run the NPA and somebody to run the Hawks. I expect them to do their jobs, and I'm not going to get in their way when they do.
I want to talk to you about the City Press headline. It says, we don't need white votes, and as Peter says, it doesn't quite do justice to what Ace said. He historically explained that the ANC has always been a non-racial organization, that whites have voted for it, but in large measure, the ANC support is a black base, and that's essentially what he's saying. But I think this headline feeds into this idea that Musi is accusing you today in one of the papers, Peter, of campaigning for Cyril Ramaphosa and being part of the elite, and that a lot of white people will vote for the African National Congress because of the spectre of a possible DA-EFF coalition.
This whole thing is so weird. It literally started off in a bar.
Doesn't everything start off in a bar?
Yes, Stanford. And some people were sitting around the bar, and they were basically white guys my age, over 60, and they're saying, we might as well just vote for Cyril because at least he's sort of, he's doing something. And so I just reported that in a column. I said, some white people my age, this stuff balloons. And it's become this huge thing now where the leader of the opposition is writing an article about me writing about something I've heard.
But Peter, this question isn't unique. Just a few days ago, I had my nails done, and a lady was bringing cookies to the person who's doing it. And she was saying, we're all thinking of voting for Cyril. He's the best. And she was the kind of age group that you were talking about. Thanduxolo, this idea that whites will vote for the ANC, there's strong opposition if you look at the track record. White people, almost to man, woman and child, have voted for the Democratic Alliance before. The possibility that there could be a sizable amount of them coming to the ANC, I mean, is questionable considering the track record. I mean, Ace is not wrong about that.
No, I mean, I read the piece, and I think the headline and the piece don't really talk to each other.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, ACE really explains that historically this is, what has been happening. Yes, you might get a sizable number of white voters, but even during Mandela's time, they didn't even vote for the ANC. That's his, his argument, and he goes further to say that generally, I mean, we get our votes from the black majority.
There's another aspect of the City Press story. It's a crosshead halfway through, which says Ramaphosa loses list battle. And I'm not sure that is the case either. I mean, they've managed to send some premiers to Parliament rather than keep them in the provinces where they are more trouble than they're worth. So if Butterbila and Nomvula and Malusi did slip through, I don't think that's the end of the world. I mean, trying to count the names as best I can, because I don't know the ANC all that intimately. I don't see a 50-50 split there. I mean, I think it's a Ramaphosa list.
Thanduxolo, the other thing I want to just add as a rider to Peter, we're also not factoring in that people serve at the pleasure of the president. He can pick his executive, and he doesn't have to pick the people on the list.
I mean, and I think there was just too much expected, of heavy-handed. But I mean, heavy-handedness to deal with the list. But you must remember, this is also the will of the branches. It is their choices that they make. So whichever way you look at it, Cyril and his faction, they couldn't really say no, we cannot have so and so in this list because of allegations against them. You are going to an election. You cannot afford to have a situation where you going into an election as a divided party, which is already, in a very rocky place, divided as it is. So you take what you have. You
work with what you have.
You work with what you have. And as you were saying, it will be after the elections to see what happens in terms of the executive that he chooses.
Yeah. I want to ask you a final question because we're running out of time. We don't have your newspaper here, but you, of course, from the Mail Guardian.
Yes.
What was your lead story and why did you pick it?
Okay, so we led with the possibility that Paul Magula, the former PIC executive that represented PIC on the board of VBS, might have actually misled the PIC commission when he said that he had no idea about the fictitious deposits and the fraud that was going on at VBS. And then I looked into, some of the transcripts that have been provided at what happened during the Terimutau hearings. And there he confessed to having, received 7.6 million.
So he's lied under oath.
That's where the situation is right now, and he confessed that he was paid to look the other way.
Is he still is he still at the PIC?
No, he was fired at the PIC because of incompetence. And that's what we led with.
Well, I'm going to look forward to how that story is going to play out. That we will
I want to ask you one question.
Okay.
Is the head of ICASA still in? Because he's now just...
This is the other thing.
So he's still in office, right?
He's still in office.
He's been found guilty of fraud.
Yes.
Literally guilty.
Sentenced to 15 years.
To 50 years. And he's sitting there in the office at ICASA in his nice, comfortable chair.
Again, we end up our show with saying, law enforcement agencies, please do your job.
Wake up.
Well, that's your fix for this week. Take care. Until next week.